10 points.
Yeah. Hello and welcome back to Disenfranchised. I am your host, Travis Gearhart, and I am here with...
Keith Cunningham.
And we are...
Disenfranchised.
So our special guest for this, the 0.5 episode is we have ourselves Daniel Delgado, who worked in the Biden administration. He is a bit of a policy wonk, and well, I'll let Daniel give me his background right now.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here with you guys and talk about some cool stuff with you all tonight. So, Travis, as you mentioned, my name is Daniel Delgado, region native, born and bred in Portage, Indiana, not too far from you guys. And I've been here in Washington, D.C. for the last 10 to 15 years now, since moving out here in the second Obama administration. And so, as you mentioned, I have been in the Department of Homeland Security for that entire time. I first moved out here for grad school, stayed, got a job, and I've been working in immigration ever since. And so having been in the immigration field with the Department of Homeland Security, which is obviously in the spotlight these days, for about 13 to 14 years up until Trump's return to office last January.
Okay, so what made you get into the immigration stuff? What was the big kind of selling factor to you? Being a Northwest Indiana kid, so to speak, and moving down there.
So when you think about immigration, right, in the broader sense, it's really all around you. Some of it is personal, obviously. For me, with a family going back some generations to different parts of Latin America, specifically Puerto Rico and Mexico, and then growing up with a lot of friends and close family members who were from, migrant backgrounds and immigrant backgrounds. So it's really always been a part of my life, ingrained in the threads of me and who I am personally, but also just I'm interested in it from another perspective, right? It has grown to be one of the biggest political football, I would say, in the last few elections and what we see now. And so it's an incredible topic that I think also gets a lot of bad rep and while you are constantly combating mis and disinformation, and it's often exploited as what we see today at some of the worst moments in our political history. But it is really something that's personal, but also something that just needs proper attention.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I know, when you and I talked, because obviously, as any listener knows, I mean, we it's not like we just jump into these things. We talk a little bit, we do some surface stuff, and we pick each other's brains a little bit. And I was actually given Daniel's information because we have a mutual buddy, Ron, that I don't know if Ron listens, but hi, Ron. And
shout out to Ron.
Yeah, shout out to Ron. I'm about to go to Houston and go golf and whoop his ass. So
nice.
We're gonna.
You ain't whooping anybody's ass.
You meant you had one. You were there for one time. We've been doing pretty good, man. The past couple times I've been at the simulator, me and Ed have been. It's been all right. Of course, it's a simulator. We'll see what it's like when we actually get down to Houston. So we're going down there with his uncle and a bunch of other family members and shit. So it's gonna be a good time.
Definitely.
But regardless, so when we had talked a little bit, you had kind of said that there were some kind of misconceptions. I mean, obviously everyone talks about the number of immigrants that came across the border during the Biden administration. That's like you said, talked about political and football and misinformation, whatever. I think there was a stat that you had said that there was a record for that you guys had broken. Did you want to expound on that a little bit? I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember it was a little bit of a misconception that immigration was super, I guess is the best way to put it.
Absolutely. So I think the misconceptions and data points have been skewed from, as long as I can think of and as long as I've been in the game before, right? If you look at political parties and presidents of both administrations, we have seen the same arguments sort of resurface and we've seen surges in both Republican and Democratic administrations. Most recently in the Biden administration, where we saw were two records actually set, right? One, which got a lot of media coverage, obviously, for, political points and other such. In December 2023, the Department of Homeland Security encountered more migrants at the southern border than it has in any month of modern history, right? So looking back, since the department was created following the 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001, we saw upwards of 10,000 migrants approaching the southern border every day, setting a phenomenal and unfortunate record in December of 23. So on one hand, you had these numbers being touted by the political right and Republicans obviously going into elections and wanting to paint the Biden administration as lax on security and open borders. But simultaneously, the Biden administration during those 4 years was also removing and deporting more migrants than any other administration going back to 2013. Right now, this is the talking point, the data point that doesn't get as much coverage, right? Because it doesn't fit a certain narrative. But simultaneously, while the administration, while the department was working to handle the increase in surge of migrants at the southern border, they were also enforcing our laws, and we were making sure that we were returning individuals who didn't have a legal basis to remain in the United States. And so on both ends, you're seeing these records set, but at the end of the day, they are being set because the immigration system is so broken and Congress
Right.
has failed to act to provide any sort of real resources and long-term change while it's left up to the courts and administrations to rule by executive action.
Well, and during that time, wasn't there some unrest down in South America as well that really pushed a lot of immigrants up that way, if I remember correctly, that really contributed to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are a number of different examples you can point to, right? I think one that is most prominent in the news as of late is Venezuela, right?
Right.
You have seen this mass exodus of Venezuelans from Venezuela following the end of Hugo Chavez's presidency, right? He dies, and then you see Nicolas Maduro take his place, right? At the same time, while Maduro is living in this fantasy world at the time and saying that his country is prospering, more than 7 million Venezuelans have left Venezuela under his rule. Now, where do they go? You have a number of folks ending up, the majority of Venezuelans ending up next door in Colombia, where Colombia's administration is looking to provide them with some temporary immigration status and benefits. But simultaneously, just like any other country or any other country that is sending migrants away from their country to another country, the United States remains this beacon of hope, right, for everybody who wants their American dream. So you have the situation with Venezuela where you are seeing a record number of Venezuelans leave their country, making this incredibly perilous and dangerous journey through the Darien jungle up into Mexico, obviously through Central America, through Mexico, and arriving at the southern border. All of this is being fueled by smuggling rings and cartels, and not just here in this hemisphere, but what we're seeing is a profound smuggling network of cartels and other individuals looking to exploit the world's most vulnerable from across the globe, right? So individuals coming from the Eastern Hemisphere as well, from China, from Kyrgyzstan, from any country you can think of, working through these networks, being exploited by these bad actors in order to reach the southern border.
Yeah.
So I have a question about the two records that were set. Well, one record, the record number deportations is high. You had a record number coming across the border. Would that have been kind of like shooting fish in a bucket? If I'm thinking about it correctly, the ones coming across the border that did not have their correct paperwork or whatever that were caught right away, were they deported right away? Was that part of the number of record deportations?
It's part of it, right? But I think to provide a better understanding of how that works, I think it's important to sort of point out how this would work if somebody approaches the border without documentation, right? So under law, if anybody sets foot in the United States and says, I'm afraid of going back to my country of origin, I want to claim asylum, the United States is required by law to process that individual, right? There were rumors and again mis and disinformation saying that we just had an open border policy that anybody could come over and stay for however long they want. That's total bullshit. So as somebody applies for asylum or claims they have an asylum claim, we have to put them through a process, right? Now, when you're seeing those sheer numbers, needless to say, the immigration system hasn't been updated, mind you, since before I was born, right? So
I
we're
was
look.
gonna guess Bill Clinton era.
I wish it was that recent. It was actually in 1986 under Reagan,
What year were you
where that
born?
was the last 89.
Oh, I was
So
84.
close.
So I'm the old guy here.
80s babies all around.
86 here, so only one of us was alive when the Bears won the Super Bowl.
But I will still hold on to that like I was.
So I might have been conceived around that time, actually. Now that I'm
This all
thinking,
makes sense now.
Oh, the
Your
Super
parents were clearly Bears fans.
a new meaning for the Super Bowl shuffle.
Right,
right?
right.
So,
Oh,
think about that, right? Like you were thinking as Bears fans, we're thinking, wow, we still hold on to the Super Bowl shuffle and
uh,
folks is just this some grand old school thing that existed before us. Now put that in terms of the immigration system, right?
yeah,
What are we looking
yeah.
at here? That means that when the immigration system last had this comprehensive reform was when Ronald Reagan was president.
Yeah.
And contrary to belief and what many on the political right want to say, that was the last time that we legally granted amnesty
Oh,
to
I know. I
people
was
who
gonna say
were
that
in the country.
he was the first. He gave a blanket amnesty check.
Exactly, right? And
Yeah,
that was the last time that we saw something like that was under a Republican president under Ronald Reagan.
yeah.
Now, fast forward a few years into George H.W. presidency and Bill Clinton's presidency, there were these incremental updates to the immigration system, but nothing as comprehensive as what Reagan did back in 86, right? And so that was the shorthand is called, we refer to as IRCA, the Immigration Reform and Control Act. And so you saw a couple other changes under George H.W. that expanded visas for individuals to come to the United States. Then Bill Clinton's update, which actually made it harder for individuals to come to the United States and stay in the United States, right? It was more enforcement minded than any other update that we had around that time.
Yeah, see,
And
I
so,
kind of remembered something. That's why I thought Clinton was the last one that had any major reform, but I kind of remembered
exactly.
stuff under that. That was part of
Yeah,
the agreement between the between Newt Gingrich and trying to get some budget stuff passed around that time.
Mhm.
exactly.
We've done a little bit of this, you know.
I think they did welfare reform around that time too.
That's
Yes.
exactly it.
Yeah,
It
so
was
they were
part of
part of
that.
the same bill. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, that was the Perora because we love acronyms. It was
Yeah.
the something welfare reform, but that's exactly it. And in there, it made it harder for immigrants to stay in the United States and made it easier for the government to remove individuals that were encountered without status, right? Now, when the asylum system was last updated, it had one demographic in mind, right? Single Mexican males when during the immigration system back in the 80s and the 90s, what we were encountering were single Mexican males coming across the southern border, right? So an immigration system was built on how to handle those individuals, whether it was detention, whether it was removing them or deporting them, however it was built, surrounded that demographic. Fast forward to early 2000s, the mid 2010s, we're not just seeing single adult males from Mexico. We're seeing unaccompanied children from Venezuela, from Guatemala. We're seeing families coming across the border. Now, you can't hold a family or an unaccompanied child in the same detention under the same detention standards that you could a single Mexican American male or Mexican male,
Right.
right?
The kids in cages.
Exactly. And so now what you have is a number of individuals and what we saw in the last 4 years, increased surge of individuals crossing the border applying for asylum. Our system wasn't built to handle that many people, right? And
Yeah.
so we're processing them as hard as or as quickly as we can, but a number of those people can't stay in custody the entire time. So they have to be released into the United States while their court case plays out. Now, do you guys have any idea how long a asylum case actually takes to play out from beginning to end?
Nope.
If it's anything else with the government, way too fucking long. So
Agreed. An average of 7 to 10 years.
Oh,
that's
man.
insane. That's
Yeah.
absolutely insane.
So that's you have people, even if a number of folks don't qualify for asylum, this is now a pull factor because it says I can just cross the border, wait until Border Patrol picks me up. I say, hey, I'm claiming asylum. Likely I'm going to get tossed into this 7 to 10 year window where I can stay legally in the United States while my case plays out, where I can work in the United States, send remittances back to my family back home.
Right, right.
And, now we have a better economic situation.
Yeah. But you understand. I mean, you can't blame anybody for, I mean, so I work for a company that is it's a Spain-based company. Our plant's down in Mexico. And I almost thought he was joking at first, but like I went down and I'm in Monterrey, Mexico, and I'm having a couple of beers with this guy. And I'll tell you a funny story about that too. So we're at this this brewery, right? And it's this awesome like outdoor brewery. It's really cool. It's between these two like little buildings in Monterrey, Mexico. It's super fucking cool. And we're drinking beer, we're talking, and he spoke pretty good English.
Mhm.
And he was kind of talking, and he's like, "Yeah, some my girlfriend, I'm probably going to propose to her sometime soon, and then, I think we might, try to get up north, and I'll try to get her pregnant, a few months beforehand. We'll get up there, so we'll try to have her have the baby in America, so he can be an American." And I was kind of like, okay, like that's like that's isn't that illegal? Like, I'm like, "You're just telling me?" I'm like, I just thought it was, like, an odd thing that I was just like that was just his plan, he's like, "Yeah, sure, this is what we're gonna do." And I was like, okay then. And it was just an interesting thing that it was just such a common thing for him to want to do. And again, I don't know how common that is for people to plan on doing that, and obviously you have the anchor baby laws, anchor baby laws, which people have debated about whether or not it should be done away with or whatever. But that's again, that circles all the way back to what you said about Congress. Half of what the biggest issues that I think a lot of people have with different reforms is that it's a magic wand that each you're not supposed to have the president of the United States have as much control and power over stuff like this. There's a reason you have a representative. There's a reason you have, like, not to change subject, but the tariffs. Of course, the Supreme Court shot them down, and you can argue this for the economic, the economics of tariffs versus any other form of taxation all day. But the reality is, unless you get rid of the income tax, you're being double taxed, first of all, and also it's Congress's job to levy taxes. So this short story long, well, that was just an interesting kind of thing. But the other funny part about it was, and you'll probably appreciate this, is there was a guy there that he actually had lived in Chicago for a little bit. His grandma lived up in Chicago, and he was there with his wife, and his wife spoke very little English, but he's talking to my Mexican buddy that I'm coworker that's out having a beer with me, introducing me to everybody, and he goes, "Oh, hey, hi, nice to meet you." And just like that, just straight, like, hey, and like, no, like, and he was just speaking Spanish a second with like the rolling the R's, I'm not going to do it because I don't, it's going to be racist. And so he's like doing the whole thing. And I'm like, and he's like, "Oh, hey," it's like, it was almost like when Dave Chappelle does his like white person impersonation, like, "Oh, nice to meet you." And I was like, "Oh man," I'm like, you dropped the accent pretty quick." And he's like, "Well, I lived for a time in Chicago." And his wife goes, "No, he doesn't. He practices this every night in the mirror just in case he meets somebody but he's a white American." And I started laughing. I'm like, "Oh, you got called out."
But it does reflect on like the reality of things, right? It's
Yeah.
I think in the first part, right, you have individuals for whatever reason looking to come to United States, whether it's economic opportunity, whether they are actually fearing for their lives or their families' lives and their health and safety. These things are real reasons. You know, it don't get me wrong. There is an industry for birth tourism, for example, right? Where it's essentially like a quasi smuggling ring that will get you to the United States if you're pregnant to have a baby so they could be a US citizen, right? Under the 14th Amendment, birthright citizenship applies to anybody born here, despite what the president tries to argue. And so you have that. Now, surprisingly, like that actually the birthright tourism issue isn't an issue mostly for Latin America. It's actually for uh, uh, individuals, right?
Oh,
So
really?
that's where you see like because it's an expensive deed, right?
I get
And so usually folks who are migrating under that pathway either have a way to secure a visa to get to the United States or they have the means to do it, right? That's not necessarily the general case for somebody who is, walking from Latin America up and making the journey on foot.
right,
And
right.
so,
Crossing the Rio Grande 6 months pregnant isn't the easiest thing
yeah,
in the world.
exactly. And what's scary is that people actually do it. And like,
Yeah.
I've been on the border. I've seen this a number of times, and it's heartbreaking because you see those folks who have sent their kids alone, their 6-year-old kids with a stranger, or someone who is 8 months pregnant trying to swim across because their lives are so desolate and they are frightened for their well-being that they are doing whatever it takes for their family's well-being. And there's a respect that needs to be levied towards those people.
Yes.
Now, at the same time, it's funny that you mentioned like this guy who has this, clear grasp of the English language on his phrases, and it's something especially now that I think is even more important for individuals living in the United States, right? And, whether it's you are here legally or illegally, and that's primarily because of a recent Supreme Court decision, right? Which essentially allows ICE to stop anybody who either looks Hispanic, looks or hears them talking with a Spanish accent, or something like standing in front of a Home Depot, right? It is giving carte blanche to ICE to have this racially discriminatory policy to stop people who look like me and my family because they think that we might be lacking documents or be here illegally. And
Right.
so I could totally see now, folks trying to lose their accent, which is, incredibly sad as because it's part of our culture, right? But like that's the
Right.
reality that a number of folks are now facing.
Yeah.
You're answering questions that I had wrote down without, like, I was going to ask you if there was any sort of any sort of demographic or ethnic group being targeted, and you're answering it. Have you seen any
Yeah,
changes
brown
between
people.
brown people? Well,
Yeah.
with this lighting, I kind of look brown.
Oh, that's gonna make a great clip.
Yeah,
We're,
it's,
we're
I
from
think
we're third or fourth generation Scottish.
I think
We
you're
Yeah,
so
were
yeah,
outsiders
German.
too.
So yeah, me and Keith's faces are just red. This is the beard. That's I don't tan. I just get redder.
Yeah.
on that point to like even to drill down a little bit more, right? Is that, you know, it is I just want to underscore the absurdity of this Supreme Court decision and ICE's tactics now, right? Like you saw you see ICE just taking over this law enforcement apparatus and operating this lawless environment without anyone to really answer to, right? They're not answering to public opinion despite us seeing different changes in personnel at the top. You have a president in Donald Trump that is encouraging this sort of rhetoric, painting an us versus them mentality between US citizens or, to be specific, white Americans to blame all the brown people and migrants for all of their woes, right? It's not because Donald Trump, fucked up healthcare and is constantly trying to take away your healthcare and has done it, or raising tariffs and took away your healthcare subsidies, or, you know, said affordability was another witch hunt and that's why you can't, afford your fucking groceries. It's all because for some reason the grandmother who's been here for 30 years and raised her family, that's the reason why your life sucks, right? And it's wild to think that we have, as a society, let that be okay and have fed into it.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about it a little bit on the show. Obviously, I mean, we do a politically minded, general show. My biggest thing about it, well, and Keith's, we're fairly much in the same line with this, is the numbers, it's kind of that proof in the pudding type deal. So if you are going to go after it and go after it hard, if you look at the actual deportation numbers, they don't hold a candle to the Obama administration or the Biden administration. And that's why, and again, I every once in a while, like I take this one off and I put on the tinfoil one, and I truly do believe that a part of this is I think it's going hard in the paint and doing it on purpose. So then second year in, he can abandon it altogether. That's what I think, because if you look at what a lot of his donors, and even some of the things that Trump has said about, well, we don't really want to take away the migrant workers. We need somebody to pick the vegetables, which is also itself, I feel, inherently racist. But
Yep.
also, like all things inherently racist, there's sometimes a little bit of truth, and the truth is there's a lot of the migrant workers that pick the vegetables are illegal Hispanics, right? So I don't know. Again, I look at it and I guess it's so blatant out there. I just have to think that it's almost done comical. And then it was funny we're doing this interview because I just did a cursory search of like what's in the news. I know they kind of abandoned stuff in Minnesota, or they've at least been really cooling it down a lot. But right here, CBS News, 5 hours ago, ICE whistleblower warns new recruits are receiving defective training, which you had kind of touched on when you and I had talked a little bit on as well. I remember you saying that was part of the big reason. And so I just want to say one more thing, and I'll kind of hand it over to you to kind of get your more. But the big thing about it is the person's name is Schwenk,
Mhm.
Ryan Schwenk. said during a hearing organized by congressional Democrats, without reform, ICE will graduate thousands of new officers who do not know their constitutional duty, do not know the limits of their authority, and who do not have the training to recognize an unlawful order. That should scare everyone. Then there's a number that I'm looking for that I read. Here we go. Within the 7-month span, training dropped from 72 to 42 days, and multiple courses dealing with use of force appear to be removed. And this is kind of what we've been saying, Keith and I, on the show, and not just us. I mean, pretty much anybody that's involved in political, anything knows that training conditions have gone down significantly, and you're not getting, they're hiring people off the street that don't know what the hell they're doing, quite frankly. So again, I don't, if that's something that makes sense to you, or if you have more to expound on it. I know that was kind of something you had kind of said in passing to me as well, that was a concern of yours, because there was something else that they got rid of that you had specified. So I'll stop talking.
Yeah, so it's it's an interesting oversight committee that held the hearing today, right? Ryan Schwank is a nice whistleblower who, is really shedding light on some of the crazy things that are happening within the agency, right? We see a lot of things happening outside, and that's being reported, whether it's individuals on their own cell phone and reporting that, or larger media outlets and or congressional Democrats and such that are trying to put the administration's feet to the flame, right? We just saw all three heads of immigration agencies testify a couple weeks ago in front of the House and the Senate, and folks really drilling down there. But you have within ICE, unfortunately, is that this environment that endorses and engages this bad behavior, right? If you look back to the beginning of the Trump administration, a little more than a year ago, they came in with guns a-blazing, right? And they said, we have this plan,
Literally.
this is what we're going. Yeah, exactly, right? And so what they've done is really, I think we had an idea of what we might see, but I think all of our expectations were blown out of the water in the worst way. And so you have an administration coming in that not only gets rid of the investigative bodies that oversee misconduct, right? So you have the OIGs, the Office of Personnel Responsibility, all of the ombudsmans, all of these folks who are their sole purpose is to make sure that the agency is acting correctly and within the laws. And if there are complaints coming up, then they investigate them, right? Without bias, and hold individuals accountable. There's zero accountability because those offices don't exist. And Republicans in Congress refuse to do their fucking job to provide oversight of this agency that, instead of adding checks to, last year they gave $75 billion. $75 billion with a B, right? That means that there was a 400% increase over ICE's budget from the year before. And they have more money than a number of other countries' entire military budget.
Yeah.
That's insane, right?
Yeah.
And so on top of that, you have a president and a deputy chief of staff in Stephen Miller, who by no means has no shame in quoting Goebbels and other white supremacists, both of them by saying that migrants are poisoning the blood of the country, right? Which is like a line right out of fucking World War II and Hitler. Not to mention a number of other things, and claiming that the U.S. is being invaded by brown people, right, to stoke the fears. They have now given ICE this ridiculous and absurd daily quota of 3,000 deportations a day, right? And Keith, going to your point earlier, saying that they are, I believe it was you, Keith, who said, looking at the numbers, that they're just woefully under previous administrations and what they're doing and trying to actually remove people, right? Because guess what? You can throw as much money as you want at the existing operational and logistical issues that have always existed within a department and within any government agency are going to exist and persist unless you actually try to solve the root causes. And this isn't that, right? We have essentially in the department and ICE specifically, whether it's, Secretary Kristi Noem or the White House or whoever else, now is saying, go out and do whatever the hell you want, essentially, right? You had Greg Bavino, who was leading this group of Border Patrol agents and ICE agents, in the interior, in Minnesota, in other places, which is not even remotely close to why they were actually there, right? Like, and what I mean by this is that they have painted this picture saying that they were deploying more enforcement to areas that had high immigrant populations or that they were encountering the worst of the worst. That's total bullshit, right? It
Absolutely.
is clearly democratic cities
It's
that
all blue states, all blue cities.
exactly, that present some sort
If
of
that was the
political
truth, they'd be down in fucking Texas. Don't you know what I
right,
mean?
right. Minnesota of all places, right? They're going after a specific group of people based on their country of origin. That's it. And because Governor Walz is there, right?
Yeah.
So you have that sort of bullshit playing into the politics and the operations, which is it's awful to see. And so now you have this agency that again, zero accountability, doing whatever the hell they want without repercussion. And so when it comes to, going back to Ryan Schwenk's whistleblowing complaint and what's going on, you have training that is put in place for individuals, right? You are taught use of force and how to handle these situations. You are taught how to handle crowds or other folks, that might interfere with your job, in a respectful way. And using your gun and shooting into a moving car should be the absolutely last thing you fucking do, right?
Yeah.
But you have individuals and to clarify, the people who were involved in the tragic deaths of the two individuals in Minnesota were not new hires, right? They were in the agency for years, so do not fall under this training method. But you have an administration that is so focused on sucking up to this president that instead of having these week-long or month-long training efforts and classes to make sure that individuals understand what they're doing, they have targeted a 47-day training period because he's the 47th fucking president.
Is that really why that number came out?
Yes.
No shit.
Like, how absurd is that?
I'm not surprised though, man.
So you went from training an individual how to use a gun and use of force and how to engage people to 47 days because you thought it was cute to impress the president because he's the
And they pay
47th
them all in
president.
Trump coin.
Right, right. Like it's so wild that you can't this sounds like some shit out of Veep, right? But
Yeah,
you
well,
can't even come up with this.
well, and it's not even like I mean, obviously Keith and we've documented, we've done 17, 18 shows now, and we're not afraid to talk about why we became disenfranchised. But that's like how can you, man, like a lot of the things that we've believed in, limited government, spending money when it's not needed. I mean, everything that we're talking about, we're not even talking about stuff that's inherently quote unquote liberal, right? Like everything we're talking about, most of the conservatives that I've known, and I'm one of them, is not not anti cop by any stretch, but like, hey, like these are my rights. Like, is there a reason you pulled me over? What's the reason you pulled me over? No, I'm not going to answer any questions. And am I being detained? Like that's there's that's how I was raised. I was 5, 6 years old. My mom, who is not, exactly a libertarian minded person, let me tell you that. But she would say like, if you get in trouble with the cops, you say two things. I want to talk to my mom and I want my lawyer. And you repeat that over and over and over again.
It's sound advice.
And here's the thing, and not to be that guy, but or to bring that into the conversation, but we've already brought it in a little bit, and I was just a pudgy white kid, like, look, I'm not statistically going to get in as much shit as a black kid or a Mexican kid or Hispanic, you know what I mean? Like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's just is, like, look, it is what it is. And don't get me wrong. We can do 5 hours on that and go back and forth. And I'm not saying that there isn't certain times where it's, you have to, stuff plays out, but I'm just saying like that was from, white middle America, I want my lawyer. It goes double if you barely speak English. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's That's the one thing that has always that's crazy to me about the whole situation. And then the money. Like, I didn't even know until you brought that up that there was that much of a funding bump. Like, Jesus Christ. I mean, but as you can see, more money doesn't necessarily mean better results. And that's kind of the conservative argument for government, period, right? Like,
Hmm.
just because we've spent more money statistically every single year on the Department of Education, and we're not getting smarter as a nation.
Clearly.
Clearly. So, yeah, man, it's that's crazy. It's an interesting the whole thing. I mean, hopefully it seems like it's simmering down a little bit. I don't know. I mean, what's your thoughts on the future going forward with this whole thing?
I
I mean,
have
do
a
you think that we're seeing sorry, Keith. Yeah.
I have a question before you move on to during your tenure in Homeland Security through Obama, Trump, Biden. Is there any new policies to help immigrants assimilate and become citizens? Or is that still from 1986 also?
Yeah. So, one quick thing to point out on the enforcement piece before moving on is that, to be clear, immigration enforcement is necessary and we need to have it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Period. Now, there are different ways, and Keith, this actually lends itself to responding to your question in a sense too, is that you have policies that direct laws, right? Like
Right.
you have the law as your base, and then you create policies around those laws and how you carry out or interpret those laws. And so, any other administration, even if you look back to the Obama administration, the Bush administration, the Biden administration, there are policies that were put in place for enforcement that allowed us to humanely and efficiently remove people who did not have a legal basis to remain in the United States, right? A number of administrations did that without separating families, separating little kids from their parents and putting kids in cages, or shooting and murdering American citizens in the streets just because they were protecting each other or had their cell phone out. Things of that nature. So like all this bullshit that you hear in the rhetoric around what's happening with ICE, saying that like, oh, it's necessary or these are domestic terrorists. Like fuck that. That's not true, and they're only trying to push their own narrative. And I think as a society, we need to be smarter than that and call it out when we see it. And I think we are starting to see that a little bit with Minnesota being a tipping point, right? And the removal of Greg Bovino as the head of um, that group that was kind of going around and being this,
Yeah.
brute force. And
Well, it
hopefully
pissed
we
off
see
the
a
guns
change.
rights people too,
I mean,
because
who
that was
knew that we would find common ground?
yeah, right? Like, that was the thing. I mean, you had Kyle Rittenhouse being like, no, hold on a second. He had every right to legally carry that gun, And again, don't get, and we said it on the show, like, do I think that, like the one guy kicked in the back lights of the one car the day before. Do I think that still means he should have been shot 15 times or 12 times in the back? No, like it's
Right.
that's not the same. Like that's been the craziest thing to me is watching all of the like hardcore MAGA people jump on something like that and be like, well, look at him. Well,
Yeah.
he kicked in the thing. Oh, here's your peaceful protester. Okay, then give him, and then push him back, get him out of the way. Pepper spray him if you have to, but you don't need to
Why couldn't you
kill him.
detain him and arrest him for vandalism? Or
Right.
Yes,
you didn't have to
right
kill
then.
him.
They had the opportunity during that time, but they
Exactly.
fucking didn't. You know?
Yeah.
It's wild that like the Venn diagram of groups that are like being brought together that you would never think of landing in the middle is remarkable.
Well, that's one of the things too that me and Keith talk about. I mean, we've had a couple libertarian people on, we've had a couple of Republicans, obviously a couple Democrats, and especially when you start getting this younger generation, a lot of these problems really do seem, and I don't want to be that guy, but I'm going to call it what it is, a lot of fucking boomer bullshit. Like it's like that's just like if you're talking, all of us are within a few years thing, and we can talk about something civilly, two former Republicans, one turned libertarian, one turned, independent, obviously Democrat, I can see Ruth Bader Ginsburg back there on the back wall, not my favorite court justice, but that's okay, teach their own. Like, and you can have those things, but there's some certain common things that we can all talk about. Like we're not sitting here, I mean, I don't even want to get on started on Israel, but that's, there's certain things that everybody's that our
Not
generation is going, nah, you're done. You lost us on here. You lost the narrative. I'm sorry. That's it. You're not going to get us back. That's
Mhm.
that's it. You're done. We're done fucking with you on A, B, C, and D. And and it's almost like it's almost like the 70s all over again. Like that's what really brought together a lot of people was the Vietnam War. And I don't know if I think this is a little bigger in Vietnam. I don't know. I think there's going to be some major changes depending on how they go.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's I don't know.
And Keith, to your question
Yeah,
about
the assimilation thing. Sorry.
policies and assimilation, is that it's a really good question because I think a lot of folks sort of miss the understanding of how this process works, right? Because there have been policies throughout, obviously depending on the administration, some administrations will make it harder for individuals to naturalize and become a US citizens. Other folks would provide additional resources for that process to take place. And that can be in the shape and form of a number of different things, right? Whether it's extending the validity of an employment authorization document to allow you to work legally in the United States for longer periods without having to refile and pay additional fees, or, increasing staff to process those applications for your citizenship more quickly, right? Because again, it's a government agency, so everything's slow as hell, but you can shift things around to make it work.
I don't see why does a government agency have to work so inefficient? Like the BMV is
Yeah.
terrible. I don't understand why it's okay. I mean,
Yeah, I think more
I will
people
say
need
the
to
Valpo
recognize that
branch
it's
is
not.
okay. I'll give the Valpo branch their credit. And I've told them this every time I go. They do a bang up job over there. I will say that. I tell them every time I go in there, I'm like, you guys actually make this fairly painless, and I appreciate you.
They're a unicorn, clearly.
They are the ones I've ever been in that I'm like, you guys got your shit together.
So, I do think that, you would obviously want I think it comes down to like how an administration views immigrants, right? This administration, for example, views them as the enemy. Let's call it what it is, right? They do not want, I mean, Stephen Miller himself has said it. Like, I mean, this guy's a white nationalist who doesn't want anybody who doesn't look like him going through the immigration process. That's why we've stopped processing, green card applications, for example, right? Those are on pause for a number of countries. Folks from other countries that are not, you know, white majority base or immigrants that are coming from those countries are now on hold. And so you have this administration approaching even those folks, even though they are telling everybody to go about things the right way, right, in quotations, they are simultaneously making it harder for the right way to exist, right?
mm,
And so that just doesn't make sense. It's counterintuitive. But as far as other policies that have been put in place, right, there are definitely processes, for example, US Citizenship and Immigration Services, right? USCIS for short, that is the agency that processes the green card applications. That's where you go to take your naturalization test. That's, sort of the bookends of the immigration system for you, right? And so when you take the naturalization test, there used to be a program through both Republican and Democratic administrations that an office, their sole job was to provide resources and partner with, for example, libraries across the US that would, approach them with additional resources like flashcards to prepare for the naturalization test, or have educators engage with them directly to help teach these classes to other individuals who are getting ready to take their test, right? So it's sufficient not only for the individual who is studying to become a citizen and going through that process, but it's also efficient for the agency, right? If you have people who are prepared and know what they're doing when they're coming in, that's a quicker interview. It's more cost efficient because it's not taking as long. The caseload isn't as heavy. People are going through that. And they are still, this is no way to sort of cut national security or screening and vetting. You're still going through all those and checking all those boxes. But at the end of the day, that last step, most critically, getting your citizenship or going through that process, you're getting the help that you need along the way to make sure that it's going to be beneficial for you, but also for the agency and everybody involved. And so I think, personally to me, obviously not, providing legal advice on the immigration system, that's not the role of a government agency, but providing whatever resources are available to ensure a more efficient and cost-effective process for everybody, I think that's the way to go. And it doesn't make sense for anyone to think otherwise.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious on what the test is. I'd almost like to take it.
You can actually.
Can
There are practice tests, or at least they were online. Um, I'll send it to you guys after this. I'll respond to the email chain.
That'd be fun.
Yeah,
There's
I'm kind of curious.
an interesting years ago, Newsweek did this article on like how many American citizens can pass a naturalization test, right? And no shit, you would be very unsurprised to realize that a number of
I would not be
Americans
surprised
cannot.
in the least bit.
That's
In
that's
the fucking
that's
least.
that's basically why I would like to take it. I'm curious on how hard it actually is. And I think
Yeah,
instead of looking at immigrants as a race, you can I don't think you should say, hey, this is a Mexican, Argentinian, whatever. Instead, you need to look at them more as this is a taxpayer. You know,
a merit-based system.
yeah, that's how it should be.
Mm.
If you're
Look,
working,
I
you're
mean,
paying taxes. The more that pay taxes, I mean, the lower our tax rate could possibly be if we get
Well,
yeah,
Israel off
and
our back.
from you being like the blue collar union guy, right? Like I was always like, why, wouldn't you want to have them become legal citizens then? Because you're anytime that you have these companies that are undercutting the wages for a lot of these people, you're doing a couple of things at the same time. You're basically devaluing what all the rest of us are, because the companies then are
You're
trying to,
devaluing labor, pretty much.
yes, you're devaluing what your labor is, but
Yeah,
so you're screwing these people over because they're not making nearly what they're worth, but then you're also creating incentives for the companies to then try to find other ways to hire illegally, right?
and
um
eliminate the ones that are legal. I agree.
Exactly. And so like we had said before, you could solve a lot of this immigration problem by making Congress pass some legislation with some real teeth to stop allowing these companies to do it, but they won't do it. And all three of us know the answer to that question, and the answer to that question is big fucking money. Big money doesn't want to solve the immigration problem. They want, the three of us to talk about it, and Trump to do what he's doing, and they're okay with it. Nothing's getting, they don't want anything to change, Eh,
Especially because at the end of the day, we can talk about it. They can shadow ban us, and it doesn't get out anyways.
we're totally shadow banned right now. So yeah, we noticed it because we were getting like clips and stuff that were getting like 1,800 views, like a fair amount. And on the low end it would be like 500, 600, and then all of a sudden they would go to like 8, 10,
Mm.
15, and I'm like, oh. And you know what? It was right after our APAC episode. I'm
Yeah, we
just
thought
saying,
you had to mention Shapiro, and I got
that
rid
was
of
it.
us.
That was it. So
On the money issue, like it's such an important point in speaking about immigrants, right? Because you have the rhetoric coming out of the administration that in itself is contradictory, right? On one hand, the administration says that all these immigrants are criminals, right? But actual data show that three-fourths of people who are picked up by ICE do not have a criminal conviction. Then you have another data point or statistic coming out saying that immigrants are lazy, they're stealing jobs, all this stuff, right? Or they're stealing public benefits. Total bullshit, right? Undocumented immigrants pay billions of dollars in taxes. They keep our public benefit system afloat, and they can't receive public benefits. Because going back to what we were talking about in the Clinton era with the Welfare Reform Act, they introduced public charge, right? And so that essentially outlawed immigrants from claiming public benefits, right? There are a few exceptions depending on what immigrant visa you are on and whether you came here as a refugee or an asylum seeker, etc. But generally you do not qualify for, a number of those big
Safety nets.
big name benefits, right? And so you're paying into a system and you're not receiving anything out. So they're keeping
Right.
those systems afloat. And so, you know, is it we're either lazy or we're taking jobs, or are we, taking money away from the economy, or are we holding it up, right? When in fact we are paying immigrants are paying billions of dollars. Now, that's not to say that there should not be a process to allow individuals to come in, but since the immigration system has not been updated in 30 something years, right?
Yeah.
Our current system and visa structure does not support today's labor demand.
Right.
Now, if you look back to, in 2024, the Biden administration and a group of us worked with Senate Republicans and Democrats to write this new bipartisan bill that actually increased visa allocations, right, to meet some of that demand, right? And it's an election year. Trump comes out and says, no, we don't want it. Republicans shoot it down. Even though it was actually going to increase, visa allocation for people to come here the right way, contribute to the economy, and it had some of the enforcement-minded policies that we've seen in decades, right, included in the bill. Yet, because it was a legislative or an election year, it was shot down, and right, and so we lost out on those opportunities. And so, all that goes to show is that you know the way I think a lot of people in Congress on both sides perhaps, but definitely what we're seeing on the Republican side as in this administration is that you don't really want to solve the immigration problem, because once you do, who do you scapegoat and what do you complain about?
Yeah.
Right?
It's another, like you said it within the first 5 minutes. It's a political football.
Yeah.
And that's actually a perfect segue into the part that I wanted to touch on, so which is just so gross. So, I'm gonna put the screen on. I'm gonna share my screen so I can show the actual page. So this is when you've made it, right? Daniel's made it, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. Me and Keith pissed off a lot of people when we were in politics. Like, and we ran and we were in elected office. So
You're
were you
not
ever
doing
elected?
anything right if you're not pissing somebody off.
You got to. And obviously I talked to Daniel. Daniel knows all the same some of the same fucking what's the word? Snake oil salesman Republicans that we know down there in Washington, D.C.
Oh, do you know a WJ, an Ordway?
There's people that write books about shit they don't know anything about. Doesn't matter. Regardless, so I'm gonna share my screen. So this got our mutual buddy Ron first introducing me to Daniel. Oh, here we go. All right. There we go. All right, I'm sharing the screen. So look at that hand, man. So I mean, right here, this is crazy to me. So you've got the DHS bureaucrat watch list, right? And so DHS watch list, and you've got, so to go through the about thing, so exposing the truth behind people and policies. The American Accountability Foundation is a nonprofit governmental oversight and research, yada yada yada. But it's done by the Heritage Foundation, which is interesting because back in the day when I was doing conservative stuff, and there's what, 3-4 dozen people on here, maybe something like that. And so back in the day when I was doing conservative stuff, I actually did like one of their little blog things on here, and I would write a little bit, and it was fine. I mean, it was a place for people that were generally conservative to put their thoughts down, and to, I would write some pieces, and again, I was in my early 20s, so I thought they were really good. Now that I'm almost 40, I'm like, oh god, they were probably horrible. They were probably so just ugh. And so I love this, like, partisan political activities. Oh no, you gave what, a couple $100 to the presidential campaigns? You bastard. How dare you? Like, you know how much money gets pumped into every other Republican? Like this is to me, like, I wouldn't have even put this fucking thing on there. Like, that's just disgraceful. So, I mean, going through here, it's got your general, I, I mean, is this something that Tell me your thoughts on it, I guess.
Yeah. I'm just happy that they used a really good picture of me. Like that's my official headshot.
Right. They at least did you a favor. I was like, look at this. This is nice.
I was like, so let me give them credit where it's due. Look, I think there are a number of things that are, comical about this that are just downright awful. And as you said in the beginning, disgusting, right? Because,
Yeah, it's just
you know,
gross.
to provide some broader context, right? I'm actually not a political appointee, right? I was a career government official who started in the government in 2014, right? I have served under presidents of both parties doing my due diligence to uphold the Constitution, right? Every public servant takes an oath to the Constitution. We do not swear an oath to any president. And
Right.
so, in our official capacities, we are doing what's within the Constitution, what's within the law, and that's how we act. Now, obviously, the last campaign season for president, when President Biden was running, then Vice President Harris taking the mantle, and Donald Trump, we saw this targeted effort by the right, specifically Heritage Foundation and accountability for our Americans for whatever the hell they're called, is ran by some loser who got a grant from the Heritage Foundation to do all this nonsense, right? And so what's wild about this is that one, it's so poorly researched. Right? Like, when this first came out, it was about a week before the election. And so myself, like a number of us, thought Vice President Harris was going to win the election. And so we really didn't pay this much mind, right? Obviously it was concerning because it has my information on there, some other things that aren't well researched on there. But if you look back at the information provided, what's funny about this is that they're trying to pass this off as um, some secret, right? All that
Right,
shit
right.
that you just saw on that is public record.
Right.
So
Most of it looked like it was articles and Facebook stuff that anybody that really wanted to know, you know,
yeah,
like
my job was to write policy, and so good governance requires that policies are published in what we call the Federal Register. So if you go to the government's Federal Register and type in my name, a whole bunch of things are going to pop up that I wrote, right? And that is just for the government record and the archive saying that Daniel Delgado wrote this policy, right? Now, because of my position in the last 4 years of the Biden administration, my name's on a lot of those things. What was copy and pasted there was literally just picked up from those publicly available documents already. So there was no, secrets there. It's literally just like
right, right.
copy and pasted. And so, the more concerning thing was that, this pops up a week before the election. Trump wins the election. And now, this whole language, because initially it was only a few of us that were on that target list, but, we were on front and center. And it says we are targets who essentially can't be trusted. Now, when you see all this political and violence that is being encouraged by
Right.
the far right MAGA conservatives, once they won the election, this takes on a different meaning for me, right? And so now
Yes.
I'm thinking, oh shit, this is actually kind of serious, because who knows that these crazy nuts on the right, far right wing MAGA folks see this, they see my picture, they see my name, and like, oh, he looks like he's another immigrant. Like, he can't be trusted with all of these things, right? And so now this becomes a security issue.
Delgado. Is that
Right,
Italian?
I like how they went with the black and white photo.
right. Like, it's so ominous. And so, you have like where it says prior employment, that's literally copy and pasted from my LinkedIn page. The political activities, that's all public record because your donations are public. That's not
Right,
even
right.
all of them. So I don't even know where the hell they found those three. And then when you scroll down to where it says an advocate for mass parole, the funny thing is that these specific policies were actually border security policies. And what they don't mention here is that the majority of the impetus behind each of those policies was so we could remove more people from those countries because we were having trouble with that. And so it's like, it's perfectly cherry picked to make it seem like I am some liberal open borders guy, which like cannot be even further from the truth.
Right,
And
right,
so, and then this one, I'm literally CC'd on an email. I'm not even a part of it. And so like
right.
it's wild shit.
Well,
Trying to
which is
persuade
funny
me.
because we talked quite extensively about ICE stuff when we had Mike Saliba on, and he wouldn't have a problem with me dropping his name because he was like, yeah, he goes, I'm pretty extreme actually on immigration. He's like I'm an open borders guy. And we're like, oh, and again, that's the point of this thing. We don't have to agree on everything. That's not
Yeah.
that's that's that we don't want to have a bunch of So hey, you guys think we should do this, right? Yep. That'd make pretty fucking boring show. So
Yeah. Like
that's
I'm
that.
in like the rest of this is literally a screenshot of my social
You're
media. Like,
right, right.
God forbid I shared something about Anthony Fauci because we both went to Georgetown. Like it was
Say that was the only damning thing for me. That was the only thing that made me go like, oh God, I'm not an Anthony Fauci fan myself, but we don't have time for that. But
it's another episode, right?
yeah, another
Yeah.
episode for sure. But like I said, it's crazy to me that this is just kind of and the main thing I wanted to do is I thought it was kind of funny, and
Ron
B
loves to show this off. I mean,
oh, he does,
this
dude.
is
Especially you get a
this
few
is his
beers on
thing.
him, and you're golfing and shit, and you're like, yeah. Ron will be like, hey, because he that's what he said. He goes, hey, he goes, yeah, man, my bro Daniel, he's real involved with politics, kind of he's kind of like how you are, like politically, like a lot of shit, you like pay attention to a lot of stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, and he always like, I don't know, you guys won't agree on everything. He's like, he's involved in a lot of Democrat stuff, and I'm like, I'm like, that doesn't matter. I'm like, that's fine. And he's like, but yeah, I'll put you in touch. And about the third or fourth time of him drunkenly being like that, I was like, all right, give me his phone number for real this time. Well, and that's like I said, then we started doing this show and I was like, ooh, you came to mind. And I was like, oh man, how cool would it be to have somebody that was actually, has actually worked within, because not everybody can say, hey, man, you met the fucking president, whatever your opinion of Biden is or Trump, Bush, Obama, you name them. I mean, to be able to say I worked in a presidential administration, I've met the president, I've worked on policies that the president signed. I mean, that's just super cool,
It's pretty rare.
Yeah, especially
Very rare.
I mean, you're from Portage, you're from Northwest Indiana, I mean, we know all kinds of people from Northwest Indiana that tried to, you know, hang off of, well, usually that was just Mike Pence's nuts. Those are usually the
Uh,
but
Yeah,
there
what a
was
turn of events with that guy.
oh God, well, that was the funny thing about this too, is when I was doing this, I kind of got, I got down a little mini rabbit hole doing some stuff, and I hadn't realized that he actually started up his own like Heritage Foundation type think
Hmm.
tank in 2021 called Advancing American Freedom, and it's also gross. Like I'm just like looking at it, and I'm just like, I don't know, man. Like, it makes me sick because I was like, man, it wasn't all that long ago. I was like, man, I would have killed to be one of these fucking douchebags with a tie, suit and tie. You know what I mean? And now I'm like, God, I couldn't imagine it now, man.
do
I
you
just
remember
couldn't.
when Pence had he had a rally in Valpo at Task Force Tips, and he pulled in with
I
his
was
like
there.
'07, '08 red Chevy truck, like,
Yep.
I'm a regular farmer guy. Yes, get the fuck out of here.
Uh-huh. Well, the thing was,
I was
he
there too.
started off.
You,
Yeah, we were both there.
yeah, remember
I-
you had the people protesting outside, something about abortions. I don't even
yeah,
remember what the hell it was.
I don't know. I
We
don't
were pretty
remember.
young back
That's
then.
we were pretty young back then, but I'm fairly certain that I like put out a joint on my way in. Like I definitely was high at that event. Like that was I oh God, I definitely like I said, man, it's shit like that. I like look back at it and I was like I got all kinds of pictures with me with Holcomb and all this other stuff, and you're like, God, what a bunch of I don't know. And it's
Well,
not just
that kind of goes to show like how far to the extremes we've gone, right? Where, Mike Pence back around that time and, was essentially like this conservative, right? He was a Republican's Republican, and that when
Well, he
he
used to
was
call himself a
announced.
libertarian. He was endorsed by the RLC, which was the Republican Liberty Caucus. And
It's
now he
right.
won't have dinner without having mama. Like,
Oh my God, like I mean, see a therapist, my guy. You don't need to be calling your wife mother. It's concerning for a number of reasons there. Um,
right.
but you had him as this like, Republican's Republican, and when he was chosen on the ticket and tried to be retracted after that, in the first Trump administration, they were like, look, this guy is gonna keep Trump in line, blah, blah, blah. And now the majority of the Republican Party has shifted so far to the right in order to acquiesce to Donald Trump is that they're like, whoa, we don't talk about Mike Pence. He's not one of us anymore.
Well, and it depends on even then, like the only caveat I'll add to that is that they're far right in the big government sense, right? They're like in the when you look at the traditional, they're moving to the right, but they're not moving to the right in a libertarian small government, sense. Because that can be construed in kind of both, because I know that depending on how how you look at the different grid, but it isn't what he ran on, right? Like
Yeah.
you have a president that ran on, all right, we're going to drain the swamp. We're going to no new wars. He ran as this populist, and it's no matter who, I love the quote from Dave Smith, the libertarian podcaster. Excuse me. No matter who you vote for, you end up with John McCain. Like that's it. You end up with this guy that just kind of shows up, doesn't really do much of anything, goes wherever the money donor, the donor money goes, and that's kind of the long and short of it. That's kind of been our experience with it. I'm obviously running against Soliday as a libertarian. I'm gonna have some fun with it. Yeah. If there's ever a year to conceivably win, maybe this would be it. But it's, at the end of the day, a third party candidate is tough. I got a little bit of going for me that I do have a little bit of name recognition in the region. Soliday's name is pretty much mud right now. The Democrat running against him he's a nice enough guy, but he's not really exciting. Like there's nothing exciting about his campaign.
Not to crush your dreams, Travis, but I'm a realist.
No, you can crush them all you want, because I know
there's a big blue wave coming, and you're at the bottom of it. You ain't at the fucking top.
No, yeah, that is true. There's not enough individual-minded voters to go. Everyone's going to be voting against the Republicans, and that's what it is.
I think so.
I would not be too complacent because we've said that a number of times before in previous elections.
That is true. Yeah.
So,
well,
let's keep the fight going.
A couple of people talking about seeing a world where they find some sort of excuse to not hold elections. That would be
that's a serious concern,
Yeah.
right? Like you have a president who is doing incredibly corrupt, incredibly outside the confines of the law and without remorse, right? And so who has looked to dictators, to other authoritarian leaders around the world like Vladimir Putin or North Korea and China.
Well, Ukraine hasn't exactly had any elections.
Right. Like saying that and having martial law imposed to, push off elections. Or more concerningly, sending in your DNI, right, your Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, to lead these raids on voter equipment centers and to try to find fraud that clearly doesn't exist as a prelude to what can come later down the road, and trying to say that, oh, we are either going to send ICE and DHS to man polls, or, we are going to look at all these ways like this the SAVE Act that is looking like the Voter Identification Act.
Yeah,
total bullshit.
That's one of the things. We're actually going to do a deeper dive episode on that. Keith and I have talked about it because we've had a couple of people that are a little more versed in that.
Mm-hmm.
A couple that reached out about what they're asking in I think it's the save or safe. I don't remember.
Yeah, that's SAVE.
Yeah, that's the SAVE Act. That's what he was referencing.
They weren't necessarily talking about immigrants. They were talking about women having to come up with documentation if they've had a divorce or multiple divorces or whatever. It's like
or got married, any sort of name change whatsoever. and it's, and that's where I find myself going, well, I think that, look, do I think that there are states that don't allow for, New York's one of them. They literally don't let you show ID, right? Do I think that you should have to show ID to vote? Yes, I do. I think you should have to show some form of ID, but I also think that if you're going to then have that, then you vote, then you have to take away the money side of that, right?
Yeah,
So if you have to
you
do
have
that,
to
then you
provide
kinda
the
have to pay
ID
for it. Yes. Yes. And so
because
if that's the case, then that's what you have to do, because I don't want the federal government. I was talking about it a little bit. Who was I talking about it with a little bit with earlier? I think my buddy Rich, who we had on the show, and we were talking a little bit about it. And I said, I don't want the federal government. It's supposed to be done by the states. The reason you do it through the states is because the federal government, exactly what you said, dictators, when you're the one counting the votes and you're the one in charge, well, the votes just happen to go your way a little more often than not. So
It's
that's
funny how that works out, right?
yeah, right. And you can't sit there and say, "Oh, I don't trust the government," or "I want small government," and you can't ignore history. You can't be like, oh, well, the government, you can't trust the government, so we have to keep our guns, which I agree with. But then, the reason I want to keep my guns and I got that AR-15 sitting over there is because of what we're talking about here. Like,
this
this is,
is why we are shadow banned.
yeah,
On the voting piece, like tying it back to immigrants, right,
yeah,
is
yeah,
that you hear a lot of criticisms that the SAVE Act, folks on the MAGA right would argue that Democrats don't want to vote for this because it's going to provide, quote, illegals, you know, it's going to take them out of the vote, right? Which obviously, even the Heritage Foundation recently published some stats that it's like
yeah,
a handful of immigrants have ever voted illegally. And if we've seen anything in the last few years, the people who have actually been convicted of voter fraud are MAGA Republicans, right? But
right.
here in the SAVE Act is that, you know, I don't think a lot of people realize, like, obviously, married women having to show all of this documentation or military personnel having to take these sensitive documents, their orders to show that, where they've been or their address, all of these other things. But there's this misconception that I picked up on from folks on the MAGA right is that they think a driver's license proves your citizenship. Right? Or
Right.
like your birth certificate, well, your birth certificate obviously will say where you're at, but like
Well, birth
other
certificates are the
documents.
most easily forged documents ever.
Right. Like you have these misconceptions like, oh, I could just show up with my driver's license and people will know I'm an American. It's like, no, you're gonna be in for a world of hurt when you go to vote with that. And they're gonna be like, well, how do we know you're a citizen? Right? And like those are sort of the consequences of not being informed and just throwing your weight and your vote behind some bullshit just because the president or somebody that you existed in a vacuum says it's a good idea without actually looking into what it means for you.
Right, right. And so, yeah, again, it kind of comes back around to full circle. What we were talking about. This all comes back around to Congress not doing their fucking job. So
Yeah.
so you have this whole issue being done, and it's all being done real last second because the hope is, and let's just call it what it is, it's politics. So the hope is that you're going to pass an act and it's gonna complicate things and muck up the water enough so that you could have enough people you make it just enough of a pain in the ass that you go, whatever, man, my vote doesn't matter anyways.
Hmm.
Just enough of those.
Exactly.
That's what you need, just enough.
Very anti-democratic.
Yes, yes. And now with that being said, then, because we always looked at I mean, back in the day when we were involved in all the Republican stuff, we knew that the longer that they kept the lines open, the more Democrat votes. You have, blue years on president, or more often than not, Democrats, and at least in Northwest Indiana, when it was a presidential, the kids showed up. If it was an off year election, the kids didn't show up. Well, the
Hmm.
kids are the ones that were going to vote Democrat. If your boomer grandma and boomer mom is going to show up and pull Republican all day long. So I'm excited. This will be my first year I vote again in like 8 years. It's been a minute. I was so sick of the whole system, man. I just didn't even bother voting, but I had to register to vote to run. So,
Your vote counts, man. Make sure you both get in there.
it
You were
does. It does.
disenfranchised.
Yeah. Disenfranchised.
I think it's a good name for us.
Well, hey,
Way to come full circle there.
dude, we always do. We find we want to be just cheesy enough. Just cheesy enough. So, well, hey man, thank you so much for coming on. Keith, is there anything else you got? I think, we're in hour 17. I say we let this man go spend some time with his family, and unless you got something.
I think if the naturalization test, if that's still available, I think we add that to the show. See how many people we can get to take
Yeah.
it. I think it's a good idea.
Well,
I
and
like
again,
that idea.
it's a good open discussion. Like that's the all right, I'm gonna keep you for a
You
couple
know what I
minutes
think is a good
because
idea, Travis? We need to
Like, shut the
invite.
fuck up.
You do talk a lot. We need to invite the ones. We've had a couple candidates on here. I want them to take the naturalization test. Maybe it'll change their opinions on things.
Ooh, that would be fun. As the political candidates come on, we make them take the test live. Ooh, that would be awesome. I like that. We'll have to bring Tyler Bridges back on, have him do it too.
Hey,
So,
Tyler and
we'll have to do that. Yeah.
the girl you talked to today, Kate for State. She was a WWE
Kate for
wrestler.
State.
So I'm curious on what is she
Yeah.
running on, and what is her finishing move? Is she more of a
Right.
Stone Cold Stunner?
We're getting that all set up. We've been. I told you too. When I saw my mom last night, she said she ran into Spinks Jr. and he asked her. He's like, "Does your to give you some backstory, Daniel? He's in Hebron where we were involved in politics and shit, and he's Democrat on the council and stuff. And my mom was a former teacher, so she went there to get she borrowed a wheelchair from the Lions Club for my old man. And when he was like, so, Travis is your son, right? She's like, yeah. And he's like, do you listen to his podcast? And she's like, no, I don't. I don't listen to it. I don't want to know. And she's like, why, do you? And he's like, oh yeah, I listen to it all the time. And she's like, oh, okay, that's weird. She's
But
like,
you
okay,
won't
fine,
like- He won't like it or
won't
follow
like it.
it.
Like it, John. So, but yeah, she was like, I don't know what you're saying on it, but according to him, he at least told my mom that he's like, yeah, he makes a lot of good points on there. And
There you
and my
go.
response to my mom was like, I go, yeah, I know. And she's like,
He's probably like, but Keith, that guy's an asshole.
well, I just assumed that we know this, so
No,
But-
it's been great talking to you guys. This has
Yeah,
been
for
really
sure, man. We're
cool.
gonna let you go. Thank you so much again. We'll get you back on sometime soon. Well, next time, especially if some more shit pops off, and it's gonna. So hey, tell your wife and kids thank you so much for letting us take up a bunch of your time. And I am Travis Gearhart,
And Keith Cunningham,
and we are
disenfranchised. I think we need Daniel to say that too.
Oh yeah, we got it. Well, Daniel,
Yeah.
he works for the system. He can't be disenfranchised. That's a fucking job.
I'm the machine. Oh no.
Right. We're the ones raising.
I'm with you guys. I'm in the fight with it. Let's keep it going.
Let's go. Onward.
All right. Later, guys.